So I have my seams pressed open, and something that I don't do, I do not fold my binding in half and press that. And you know, as pretty as the little rolled up binding looks, I actually find I get a better result when I attach it to my quilt if I don't fold that over. So if you want to fold that over wrong sides together and press that binding in half like that, go for it. But I'm not going to do that today. And so I just take this pile of binding and shove it in the throat of a machine. I'm about to attach this binding to my quilt. I have my 1/4 inch seam foot attached, and I like to attach my binding to the back of my quilt and flip it over to the front. I know that is not what most people do, so if you want to go from front to back, go for it. I do feel like going from back to front works better for using a decorative top stitch like I do. So we're going to start sewing, and we're actually going to start about maybe 8 inches or so down from where the top of this little piece would be. And you want to make sure that you have plenty of leeway before you get to the end. Maybe you want to start closer to the middle of whatever side of the quilt that you're working on. You don't want to start too close to either of the ends. So we're first going to just take just a few stitches. And I backspace a little bit, backstitch a little bit. And then we're going to press our foot up, and we're going to start folding this binding over wrong sides together as we go. And we need this binding folded wrong sides together, but I feel like I get better results with turning it over to the other side and having it lay flat if I don't have that crease ironed there, like there would be if I ironed it in the first place. Like I said, you're just folding that over as you go, sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And another thing, you can see my label here. If you're going to do that corner label like that, you need to do that before you start putting your binding on. Now, once we get close to the edge, I'm actually going to go ahead and just finger press a crease right here, just an inch or two past the end. And the reason for that is because that crease will actually help you when you're going to do the next step. So you can use the markings on your foot. You can use the markings on your sewing machine, or you can actually mark it, but at this point you'll want to start sewing until you're about a 1/4 inch, well, or a 1/4 inch from the edge here. So if you're using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you want to stop when you're a 1/4 inch from the edge. And I'm just using my fingernail here so that I can see where that edge is to know to line that up with my sewing machine, with the markings on my sewing machine. Okay. And once you get to that 1/4 inch, we're going to leave our needle down, but pick up the foot, and you're going to sew a diagonal off to that edge, off to that corner of the quilt. All right. Now that you have that diagonal sewn, you're going to pull this strip up so that you have the edge of this strip in line with the edge of the quilt, and you can kind of make a little crease there. It might help a little bit. And then you're going to bring that top piece back down. Now this is where the magic happens as far as making it so that you can have nice mitered edges. Now, when I first started making binding, I would always try to figure out where the 1/4 inch here and the 1/4 inch here met and try to start sewing right there. But, you know, the longer I did this, I realized that is not actually necessary. You can start sewing off the edge and go with your 1/4 inch seam allowance, or you can start sewing. I usually try to sew maybe 1 or 2 stitches in, and that's going to be fine because it'll still open up correctly and it's easier to do. Also, if you try to start sewing exactly at that 1/4 inch point, but you miss a little bit, it does affect the binding. So I'm going to start sewing just about right there, maybe 1 or 2 stitches from this top edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we're still folding those edges together, folding this binding, wrong sides together and lining up the edges. 1/4 inch seam allowance as we go. And we'll repeat that process that we just did with all 4 corners. And once we get done with that 4th corner, I'll meet you back here and show you what we're going to do next. So once you have come around all 4 of your corners, you're going to find that piece where your binding started and kind of stretch it out like where it would be once you're finished. And then you're going to take that edge of that piece there, and don't worry about the selvage, that'll get cut off. And you're going to come about 8-10 inches up from there. And I'm actually going to make a mark just so it's easier for me to see where I need to stop. And just so long as you make sure that mark stays within where that 1/4 inch seam allowance will be, it won't show up in your quilt. And I just used a pencil because I don't want to worry about potentially like getting ink smeared on my quilt when I wash it. And you're going to sew down to that mark that you just made. I'm going to find it here. Okay. So there's my mark. I'm just going to kind of keep my finger close to that so I know where to stop. All right, when I get there, I'm going to back stitch a few stitches. And now it's time to join the ends of the binding. And when I first started quilting, this was the part that stressed me out the most by far. And I always felt like I had a hard time making it so that I could keep the pieces from getting twisted, getting those to match up exactly. So I'm going to show you a way that I have come up with to make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to just switch camera angles here so I can zoom out and let you see it a little bit better.